You bought the building in 2011 for $412,000, which felt like a fortune at the time and looks like a rounding error now. 12 units, 3 stories, a brick facade with the mortar crumbling out of it like sugar. The previous owner was a retired school teacher named Delia who cried at the closing table because she'd inherited it from her father and couldn't afford the roof anymore. You told her you'd take care of the place. You meant it when you said it. That's the part people never believe, that you meant it. And by the end of the decade, there would be one specific decision, one line item you approved on a Tuesday afternoon without thinking about it for more than 4 minutes that would end up being the reason a woman testified against you in a room with a court reporter and a video camera. You wouldn't recognize it as the decision at the time. Nobody ever does. The first year almost broke you. You didn't understand cash flow yet. You understood rent. 12 units times $800 is $9,600 a month, and that number lived in your head like a promise. What you didn't understand is that the number is a lie. The mortgage takes $4,000, taxes take $1,100, and insurance takes $600, and it goes up every year regardless of what you do. Water is on the owner in a building this old because there's 1 meter for the whole property, and a single running toilet on the 3rd floor can add $300 a month without anyone noticing. Trash pickup, common area electric, the boiler service contract. You did the arithmetic in a spiral notebook at your kitchen table at 11 at night and found out that a fully occupied building with everybody paying on time cleared about $700 a month, which is not a business, it's a part-time job with a mortgage attached. And that's when everything works. Nothing works. The first winter, the boiler failed on a Friday at night in January, and the emergency service call was $2,200 for a part and 4 hours of labor. And you sat in your car outside the building at 2 in the morning with the receipt on the passenger seat, doing math you already knew the answer to. That was 3 months of profit gone in one night. Unit 2B stopped paying in March, and it took you 5 months and $1,800 in filing fees and attorney time to get her out. And when you finally opened the door, the carpet had to be replaced, and the bathroom fan had been running so long the motor had seized, and the ceiling above it was black with mold. $1,400. And she owed you $6,000 you were never going to see, and everyone told you not to bother chasing. So, you learned. That's the honest word for it. You learned. You learned that the tenants who complain the most are usually the ones who pay on time, because the ones who pay on time feel entitled to something in return. You learned that a work order has a half-life. If you don't respond for 2 weeks, about 40% of them stop asking. Not because the problem got fixed, because people are tired, and calling a landlord 4 times feels like begging, and most people would rather live with a slow drain than beg. You didn't discover this cynically. You discovered it by accident in a month when you were genuinely overwhelmed, and then you noticed the pattern afterwards. That's how it always starts. You do the wrong thing for an innocent reason, and then you noticed it worked. The first real compromise was the window in 3A. Single pane, sash cord snapped, wouldn't stay open without a book propping it. The tenant asked in April. A proper replacement was $1,100 for a code-compliant exit window in a building of that vintage. You had $430 in the operating account. So you went up with a screwdriver and a length of nylon cord, and you spent 90 minutes making it functional, and it was functional, and you told yourself that was maintenance. It just wasn't a window. You told yourself you'd do it right in the fall. Fall came, the roof needed flashing, the window stayed.
That's the rationalization that runs the whole industry, and you should say it out loud because it's seductive. There is always something more urgent. It's true. It's always true. Deferred maintenance isn't a decision, it's a queue, and the queue is infinite, and every item you push down the queue was pushed by something legitimately worse. You never once sat down and decided not to fix the building. You just triaged every month for 9 years, and triage that never ends is just neglect wearing a lab coat. By 2015, you'd figured out the second layer. Rent in the neighborhood had started moving. A coffee place opened, then a brewery, then the kind of grocery store that sells 4 kinds of vinegar. Your $800 units were suddenly worth $1,250, but only on turnover because the long-term tenants were protected by inertia and by the fact that they'd never leave. So you developed a relationship with turnover. You didn't harass anybody, you didn't have to. You just stopped being reachable. A tenant who's been asking about the bathroom fan for 8 months and getting nothing eventually starts looking at listings on their phone at midnight, and when they give notice, you feel nothing but relief, and you paint the walls a warm gray, replace the light fixtures with the $18 ones that look like $90, and list it at $1,250. The apartment is exactly as broken as it was. It photographs beautifully. You started calling it natural attrition in conversations with the other owners you'd met at the County Landlord Association meetings, and they nodded because they all had a phrase for it. That's the tell, by the way. When an industry has developed a comfortable euphemism for something, the thing is usually undefensible and everybody involved knows it. The third escalation was the inspections. The city ran a rental registration program. Every unit inspected once every 5 years, $22 per unit, and a list of violations you had 90 days to cure. The first cycle, you cured everything, and it cost you $9,000, and you were furious about it for a year. The second cycle, you'd learn the rhythm. Inspectors are overloaded. They schedule 2 weeks out, in writing. You'd get the letter, and in those 2 weeks, you do what everyone does. Put a fresh smoke detector in every unit, run a bead of caulk around the tub in 1C, tighten the handrail on the back stairs, swap the flickering ballast in the basement. Cosmetic compliance. The inspector walks through in 11 minutes per unit with a clipboard, checks the things on the list, and the list doesn't include the fact that the fire escape's bottom ladder had rusted into a fixed position and would not drop. The list is not the building. You knew the difference between the list and the building better than anyone alive, and that knowledge was worth more than the building itself. The fourth escalation was money, and it came fast. You refinanced in 2017 against the new appraised value, pulled $180,000 out and bought a second building, 8 units on the other side of the river, then a third in 2019, 16 units, and by then you weren't a guy with a spiral notebook, you were an LLC with 3 sub-LLCs and a property management company you'd incorporated so that tenants' complaints went to an email address monitored by a part-time employee named Marcus, who had no authority to spend anything over $200. That's not an accident. That's the architecture. Every layer you add between yourself and a tenant's kitchen is a layer of deniability. And the beautiful thing about deniability is that eventually it becomes real. By 2019, you genuinely did not know that Unit 3A still had the cord and screwdriver window. You had constructed a life where not knowing was a service you paid for. Marcus quit in 2020. He sent you a long email you read half of. Something about the water heater in the 8 unit and how he'd been telling you for 4 months and had started answering tenants' emails. Honestly, because he couldn't keep lying to them. You forwarded it to your attorney, who told you to accept the resignation without comment and not to respond to any of the substance. You didn't respond. You hired a management company instead, an actual one with a logo. And their fee was 8%, and they were worse than Marcus in every way that mattered and better in the only way that counted. They never told you anything. The close call came in 2021, and it came from the direction you never watched. Not the city, not a tenant. A reporter at the Alt Weekly doing a series on the neighborhood's rent trajectory pulled the code enforcement records, public, all of it, always was, and cross-referenced complaint volume against ownership entities. Your 3 LLCs came up as one cluster because you'd used the same registered agent for all of them, which you'd done to save $400 a year. She called the property management company. They said no comment correctly. She called you at your personal cell, which you had because your name was on the 2011 deed from before you knew to hide. You were good on that call. You were so good, it frightened you afterward. You talked about deferred maintenance in the housing stock. You talked about the cost of capital improvements in pre-war buildings, about how the same people who want habitability enforcement also fight every rent increase, about how you personally lost money for 4 years before you made a dime. All of it is true. Every sentence is individually true, and the whole thing a lie, and you could feel the shape of the lie in your mouth as you built it. She printed 2 of your quotes. The article ran, it was thorough and fair and slightly boring, and nothing happened. 600 shares. A city council member mentioned it once. Nothing happened.
That's the thing nobody prepares you for. You expect the close call to change you. You brace for the consequence, and the consequence doesn't come. And what that does to a person is worse than the consequence would have been. You'd spent 3 weeks with your stomach in a knot rehearsing answers, and then the world simply moved on. And the lesson you actually learned, not the one you should have learned, was that you had overestimated the danger for a decade. So you got faster. In 2022, you stopped doing the pre-inspection calc. Why pay for theater when nobody's watching the stage? Here's the decision. It was a Tuesday in October of 2022. The management company sent a bundled approval request, 11 line items, and you were on the phone about something else, and you approved 9 and declined 2. One of the declines was a quote for $1,840 to replace the bottom ladder assembly and repaint the fire escape on the original 12 unit. You declined it because you'd gotten a competing verbal estimate at $1,200 and you wanted to use that guy, and you meant to call him, and October became November, became a year. 4 minutes of thought, 2 of them about the number. In February 2024, a grease fire started in Unit 2C at 9:40 at night. It was contained to the kitchen and the fire department had it out in under 20 minutes. Nobody died. But the woman in 3A, 61 years old, a home health aide who lived in that building before you owned it, went out her window onto the fire escape the way you're supposed to, and the ladder did not drop, and she went down the last 12 feet by climbing over the rail and hanging from the platform edge and dropping onto a dumpster lid. She shattered her calcaneus and fractured 2 vertebrae. She was in a wheelchair for 5 months, and she will never again do the job she did for 31 years. The fire marshal's report noted the latter. The city's records showed the 2022 quote because the management company had documented it, because that's what management companies do. They document everything, which is a service that protects them, not you. Her attorney found the article from 2021. He found the 3 LLCs in the shared registered agent. He found Marcus, who had kept his emails, all 4 months of them, and who was thrilled to be asked. You settled $2.1 million, of which insurance paid $1.3, and the rest came from selling the 8 unit and refinancing the 16. There was no criminal charge. There is almost never a criminal charge. You did not go to prison. You are, right now, still a landlord. Smaller, chastened in a way that mostly manifests as better documentation, and you fix things now, quickly, because your carrier requires quarterly third-party inspections as a condition of renewal, and because you can afford to, and because the memory of a deposition transcript is a surprisingly durable form of motivation. But here's what you should take from this, and it isn't don't be greedy, because you were never greedy in any way you could have detected at the time. It's this. You never made the choice you're being blamed for. You made 400 smaller choices, each one defensible in isolation, each one made under real constraint, and the harm was the sum of them. That's how almost all serious harm gets done, not by villains deciding to hurt people, but by ordinary people optimizing locally, while the consequences pool somewhere they don't have to look. The structures you build to protect yourself from liability are the same structures that protect you from knowing. And a person who has arranged to not know isn't innocent. They're just comfortable. The woman on the dumpster lid did not need you to be a good person. She needed a ladder that dropped, and it cost $1,840, and you had it. If you want to see how the same math plays out when the guy making it wears a better suit, stick around. The hospital administrator and the city building inspector are both on this channel, and neither of them thinks he did anything wrong either.